Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, it's so important to find those stories now more than ever that we don't necessarily expect. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more, as always. My name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things, I'm assuming you do, because you're listening to us right now, you can subscribe to the podcast. You can find us over at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, basically wherever you find your podcasts. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel, and if you can like and subscribe to us there too, we'd really appreciate it. You can also find us on social media, on the Facebook, the Twitter, and the Instagram, as the kids are calling it, at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, with all the latest and greatest from the worlds of television, film, video on demand, festivals, and anything else we can think of. Basically, we love writing and talking about the moving image, and we love it when you come by and read about it. So please come on by. All right, on this episode, we're talking about the Toronto Jewish Film Festival, which is one of our more interesting film festivals that happens here in our fair city, and it runs from the third. It starts today. I'm blabbering, but it starts today, and it runs until the 13th, and it's showing a wide variety of films online. We're going to have a few reviews up for you at some point, but we're talking today about basically the opening night film, which is happening right now and will be sort of accessible for the next 48 hours on the Toronto Jewish Film Foundation platform. If you want to find out more about the fest, I do recommend you just look up tjff.com, and they will have all sorts of fun info for you. But the film we're talking about is called Shelter. It's a fantastic documentary from filmmaker Ron Chapman, and it's a homegrown story. It's a story about Toronto. It's a story about people who manage to survive and then thrive. But it looks at how Toronto, which, you know, in like the 40s and the 50s early 50s, was basically a very small city and surrounded by a lot of farms. But it turned into one of the most livable cities in the world. And it was a city that had laws on banning Jews doing business on Yonge Street. And the only thing they could do was build. So when a lot of the Jewish population who lives here now came over from the war, after the war, before the war, they would build high-rises, and they built lots of very affordable and very sort of fantastic apartment buildings, many of which are still up and working until this day. And it looks at the history of sort of not just the Jewish community and how they settled in Toronto, but how they built it and make it better. And director Ron Chapman really gets to sit down and talk with so many of the names that are that are really synonymous with not just construction with the city, but city itself, like the Tenenbaums, the Greens, the Diamonds and Daniels, who are basically the Cadillac Fairview Corp, and also people who built the Sky Dome. And it's a story that how one wave of immigrants and refugees really sort of came together and not only improved their own way of life after they escaped the horrors of the war, which obviously they had to, but they improved the lives of everybody around them, and they made Toronto a better city. And we talk with Ron about this and so very much more, because it is opening the Toronto Jewish Film Festival tonight. Like I said, if you want to go check this out, I would recommend going over to tjff.com, which is the film festival website and the platform which they are streaming everything on. Go check out Shelter and check out some of the other amazing films they have going on during the run of the fest. But right now, I hope you enjoy our talk with Ron, because it's a good one. Now, I mean, first off, just congratulations on the film, and congratulations on being a part of the festival, and thanks for
Thank you.
coming on. And I mean, my first question is because, I mean, on one end, I was just struck by the stories, but on the other end, I was struck by sort of, I guess maybe sort of how important the story was, because it wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily one that was necessarily sort of sitting in my, sitting sort of on the top of my memory. But then when it all sort of came together, I was like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. This is a fantastic story. I mean, I loved just how passionate everyone you talked to was, and just how this really felt like a mitzvah for them, especially coming, post war and coming to Toronto.
Yeah.
Walk me through, I guess, you sort of coming across the story and wanting to tell it this way.
Certainly. The story, I was first approached by Mark Kenny, who's the executive producer on the film. And he was the one who said, you know what, there's a really important story here that nobody really knows about in this city that needs to be told somehow in a film. He'd never made a film before. He's the CEO of Capri, a big organization, but he's I guess he was Protestant originally, Irish Protestant, and he ended up in the building industry, and ended up mentoring with a variety of these individuals. He worked for them and interacted with them as he was coming up in the business, and he, had never really had that kind of contact with the Jewish community before, these guys, but because of their ethics, because of their history, because of the way they did business, the things that they cared about, and the way that they mentored him, he went, this is just an exceptional group of people, and what they accomplished is exceptional, and what they came from is exceptional. Their impact on the city is exceptional. It's an exceptional story, and yet nobody, not even people, in the Jewish community, are really aware of this story or the impact that these people had. So it was, he wanted to do a film that somehow recognized this, that talked about what they built, and came to me. And I was particularly interested, first of all, because, he wasn't Jewish, and it wasn't like the Jewish community saying, we really need this to show people what our community is like. But here was someone who wasn't Jewish, who was so moved by these people, and had a bit of an understanding of their history and their culture, and the importance of all that, their contribution. And I thought, in these times especially, this is a successful immigration story. It's a successful integration of immigration story, and it's a successful story showing how immigrants actually had an impact on the growth and development of a city, of a culture, of a people. Toronto, as is considered now one of the top 5 cities in the world to live in. And it's considered one of the most successful multicultural cities in the world. In no small part, I believe, and experts believe, that success in multiculturalism is very much because of the way immigrants were brought into the city at the time, and the start that they were given. It's that good start theory, that 0 to 6 theory, that you know what, if you give people a place where they can live with a sense of self-respect, a sense of decency, and pride, and that they are going to have a better chance of succeeding. So immigrants who came here, as opposed to immigrants who ended up in some of the American cities, where they'd arrive and they'd be in places run by slum landlords, living in basements without hot and cold running water, with rats and cockroaches and stuff. It's not a great start. It's not a great introduction to make you really feel good about yourself. But these guys built great places where people could live with a sense of self-respect and decency. And they built a unique thing called the affordable apartment rental model, which were accessible to these immigrants and waves of immigrants who were coming into Toronto at the time. So to me, this is much more than a story about the Jewish community or for the Jewish community. This is a story that I hope, and I believe, and there's already been indications, is gonna cut across these communities and speak to all kinds of communities, all kinds of immigrants coming into the city, and also, the people who have lived here for a long time, and inform them about their past, their history, and how we got to where we are. Toronto, was in the early 50s when these guys came, it was a very prejudiced city. It was a very discriminatory city. This was not an open and welcoming arms environment, but it changed over time. And it changed very much because of these waves of immigrants who came in and influenced the city, contributed to the city, gave so much.
Well, I mean, I think that's the thing that stood out for me was because, I mean, obviously, sort of in the pop culture mindset, as it were, like the word immigrant doesn't necessarily have a positive sort of context. It's people running away from something. And I
Yeah,
was so struck by, I mean, while that's obviously true in this case, I was
yeah,
struck by sort of the desire for these people and these men and these women to pay it forward. And I'm like, how important was it for you to sort of really hammer home on that part? It wasn't just about them coming to Toronto and starting a new life. It was trying to make a better life, not just for them, but for the place that they're living in.
yeah. I think that was part of a continuation and culmination of the story. I mean, when you think about it, and again, uh, to me, the journey was so important that they undertook,
Mm,
where they came from, because who were they when they started? These were people who were living a nice life in cities and communities where the world was good. That all got turned upside down for a lot of them for a variety of reasons, and they lost community, they lost family, they lost friends, they lost money, they lost everything. And by the time they arrived here, they had very little to nothing. And so one of the things that was very clear is that they wanted to build and surround themselves again with community, and build that community and find meaning in community, which is really what they did. They contributed so much to, they wanted to build family again. They had their families taken away from them. They had to start again, build family, build community, and then what can we do to make this a better place? And that was really their progression. First just subsistence, living, finding a job, taking care of family, and now what can I do with the community? What can we do to make this a better place and contribute to a place that gave us this opportunity to have a new start? And when you look at where they came from and then what they arrived at, these people were so grateful, as I think so many immigrants are who have come to this city, been so grateful for what Toronto and for what Canada has afforded them, the opportunity that they've been given here. It's unique.
yeah. How willing were all your subjects to sort of participate? Because like you even said at the beginning, this isn't necessarily a story that's well known. I mean, if only because people haven't been talking about it. How willing were people to sort of sit down and sort of really lay out the entire story?
Well, there's a lot of people in the story, and clearly,
Yeah.
so some of them were great. This is an important project, and we're happy to contribute. Again, nobody really knew what the final story or film was going to be. That was in my head, but they knew what the framework was. I mean, specifically, there was people like Mendel Tannenbaum, who's in the film, and who's a Holocaust survivor. He had never told his story before, on camera or to anyone. And when he was first approached, he didn't want to do it. He went, "What difference is it going to make? How's it going to change the world?" And he changed after a while. I interviewed his daughter Sally, and for her, I think it was a really good experience. It was an experience, talking through it. It's almost cathartic in a way. And she encouraged her father to sit with me, and eventually he did. And he became an important part of the film. Sam Brown, who was another Holocaust survivor in the film, wasn't well at the time and didn't know that he could do it, but he had this moment where he was in better health, and we were able to take that opportunity to interview him. And others were very enthusiastic, because look, when I was first approached with this, people would say to me, "Really, you're going to make a film about just a bunch of rich, well-to-do builders? I mean, how is that a film? How is that an interesting story? I mean, these are just privileged people." And that's from a distance with a long, that's what a lot of people think about these people. Even people in their community look at them like that. But once you peel away the layers of who they are, where they came from, what they went through, what they survived, and what they built, you go, they're not just privileged people. They're privileged. The privilege is that they managed to be able to do what they did and survive what they survived and built what they built. But they're an exceptional group of people, and I think there's a lesson in that also.
I had to laugh because I admittedly had my eyebrow up when I initially read the log line for the film. I'm like, really? This is going to be a
Yeah,
movie? All right, let's find out. But no, there's layers here, and there's really
yeah.
important layers here that deserve to be told. And I'm kind of curious because, I mean, obviously on a film like this, you'll know the framework, you'll get the pitch, you'll go talk to people. But I'm kind of curious, during the entire process, was there a moment when you knew you had a film? Like, what was the moment that sort of hit you when it's like, okay, this is going to work?
Well, I think it, frankly, I mean, it wasn't until I did pre-interviews with a lot of the subjects,
Okay.
and until then, I didn't know what I had. I knew that there's a story, but what made the story impactful, what was going to touch people, and it's the same as within the film when you understand where they came from and what they went through and then what they were able to accomplish after that and what their contribution was, you went, wow. And the interesting thing was, I mean, there's the people in the film and then there's more people in that community. There are other builders that, there weren't time to address. What was interesting was that there was such a connectivity between all these different people. There was all individual stories and they all had their own, inspirational and yet heartbreaking and horrific at the same time. But all of them were very similar in terms of where they came from, what they overcame, and what they accomplished. There was it was about community again. And one of the things that was so meaningful to me about this is it really is about, at its heart, about community. It's about individuals overcoming incredible
Yeah.
obstacles, I mean, surviving in spite of God knows how they did it. And then the importance of community to those people and building that community after it. And then them being able to look beyond community and family to something like the city of Toronto. And when you look around Toronto and you see the impact that these families have had on the culture of Toronto, you can look at, the theaters, the concert halls, they have had so much to do. You look at the hospitals and what they've done. You look at education and what these individuals' contributions have been and those communities have been. And it is a huge impact. Toronto is very much what it is today as a result of their contribution and as a result of the contribution of numerous other groups of immigrants who have come through and helped shape this city into, I think, what is an amazing place when you look at the xenophobia at this times across the border. When you
For
look at,
sure.
the conversation on immigrants across the border, you shake your head and go, how can people who are all from immigrants be talking about
Yeah.
immigrants like that? They're all from immigrants, and yet there it is. There. So Canada, should be proud, and I think there's like I said, when these people first came, it wasn't easy for them, and it wasn't a welcoming, warm country. They got in spite of a lot of the prejudice that was here, but the country did overcome that prejudice, and the people within the city did overcome that prejudice and really embraced all these different cultures. And you look at the mosaic of Toronto and how the city works and the contributions of all these communities, and we have an exceptional city that we should all be very proud of here
No, I agree
as
with you.
Torontonians, as Canadians.
I agree with you 100%. And I mean, I think the real magic of this film is just it reminds you people of the joy of talking to people and just stories and just sort of being able to
Mm.
learn and sort of understand through that way. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, is that what got you into this business? Just sort of trying to find those stories that maybe people had forgotten about or even hadn't asked about.
Well, I've always been interested in stories,
Yeah.
clearly, and I've always been interested in how those stories are communicated and the impact that those stories have on people, on communities, on shaping the way people think, informing them, or influencing their opinions. As a filmmaker, I actually, when I started making films, said that there's a lot of films that just look at the ugly underbelly of things, and they try to expose horrific things and reality, all that stuff, reality TV. And I said, I think there's room for films that are positive, that tell inspirational stories and inspire people to be better. And that's sort of the genre that I wanted to focus on more. Inspirational stories that inspire us to be better people.
And I mean, I think this is one of those films because it almost, to me, it made me feel like I was either, sitting in a bar with my grandfather or just sort of sitting and listening to a
Mm.
story and just sort of understanding the magic of just being able to appreciate a story in that moment. Because I mean, like I said before, if you look at the log line and it's like, oh, it's a documentary about the birth of the Jewish construction business out in Toronto after the war, people would go, what? But no, there's so much more here, and there really is layers, and there's such a human story and such a fantastic story about people wanting to come over to a new land and pay it forward and make the place that they're living in now a better place. And that really is what has gotten forgotten, especially given now with all the crises that we have all across the world. Like, people aren't, people don't want to be immigrants, but sometimes they have to be, and they want to try to make a better life for themselves. But if they make a better life for themselves, they're going to make a better life for everyone in the city that they're living in. And I mean, and that's something that needs to be remembered.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And that community gets smaller and smaller as the world has gotten smaller and smaller, and it's more and more, this is not just a Toronto story. It's not just meant for the people of Toronto or an Ontario story, a Canadian story. This is very much an international story that I think, informs people a bit in terms of how they should be looking at what is going on in the world. Because I mean, we've had so many waves of immigrants here. Other countries have waves of immigrants, and there's been, it has been difficult and not well received in a lot of cases. And yet, with a different spin, this could be a boon to everybody. It could be a boon to the world that these immigrants are coming in and influencing and informing different cultures.
And it's such an enrichment to community as well. And I mean, that's something else that we lose given how
Yes.
smaller the world is getting, given technology and just the state of it, they're in. But it's one of those things that reminds, I mean, and I mean, this is why I love film, because it's just, it's story and it's people, and it's
Mhm.
getting to the heart of something real and beautiful. And I just want to say thank you again for the time, and thank you for the film.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I love talking to you, and I'm very pleased to be able to finally present this film and get it out there. And
For sure. I can't wait for more
thank
people
you.
to see it. Yeah. Thanks again for the time, Ron.
Thank you so much. Take care.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.